Hello and welcome back to What's Millie Making, where I'm Millie, and this is a space where I talk about the past, present, and future of my making, primarily knitting. Today's video is Knitting Podcast episode 11. The past 2 weeks of my knitting have been kind of off, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I'll have times where like one project isn't going well, but it's very rare that I have 3 sweater projects all giving me a hard time, but it's all right because I found my knitting mojo again with some smaller projects. Also, in this episode, I will finally be talking about my quilting finished object from November because I've just been putting it off, but that will be at the end of the section, so if you're not interested in that, you can just skip to the next chapter. So I guess without further ado, let's get into finished objects. Should I start off with the problematic finished objects or the ones that I like? I guess we can start off with the problematic finished object, and that is my Ava cardigan by Petite. As you can see, it has already been packed up to be put away for a few months before I can bear to look at it. Now I'm going to take it out of the bag and hold your laughter because it looks comically bad. Are you ready for this? Look at that button band, folks. Look at that button band. I guess I should talk about the basics of this sweater first. So this is a top-down cardigan knit at like a DK weight or worsted weight gauge. I think she recommends Peer Gynt by Santa's Garn in the pattern, which I think kind of is a flexible yarn. I've seen it go both ways. And the yarn that I used in this project is kind of the same, which I'll talk about in a bit. It has a very interesting shoulder construction. I think it's kind of like a contiguous sleeve construction. I don't know. Petite knit has so many different shoulder constructions that sometimes I run out of names of what to call them. But in this one, you do some shoulder shaping flat, I think, before you work like raglan-like increases, and I modified mine to be steeped. So after I worked the yoke, there's a point where you are joining back yoke to the front yoke, and I cast on a few extra stitches so I can knit the body in the round and eventually stick it, which I have not done. I really didn't like the look of the 2x2 rib in the button band. It just wasn't my vibe, especially with the yarn that I'm using. It has kind of like a wavy, crunchy texture. Like, it blocks out really nicely, but right off it is quite a textured yarn, and I didn't really love the way that my ribbing was looking in this yarn. Like, I know when it blocks out it will look nice, but just fresh off the needles it looks, I don't know, very uneven. And it's not purely the yarn's fault, it's also my fault. I do not have the best tension when I am ribbing, although it has improved a lot over the past year. So initially I had planned on knitting a double knit button band on this, but then I was kind of over this project because I had cast it on in May to be a layering piece over some of my dresses while I was traveling. I didn't get it done in time for my trip. It just kind of kept lingering and lingering and lingering on the needles, and usually, I mean, I am no stranger to abandoned whips or whips that take me forever. However, this is the first time it's happened to me with a stockinette project. Most stockinette projects, like, I'm just able to get it done because it's very straightforward. There's no like color work or cables or lace or whatever that is putting me off, and it feels like an easy win. But something about this, I think within the time that I cast this on, and currently I really don't have any interest in wearing a v-neck cardigan at the moment. I've talked about it a lot in my previous, like, past recent videos, but I'm really into the whole crew neck cardigan thing, so that kind of just put me off further on this project. So all that said, I didn't feel like investing the time to do a double knit button band on a cardigan that I wasn't really sure how much I was going to wear it anyways. So instead I wanted to do I think it's called a vertical button band. I couldn't find like a good tutorial on YouTube that was giving me the result that I wanted, so I ended up purchasing a different pattern, which is the V-neck choki, I want to say. I'm pretty sure it's by Noriko Ichikawa. I will insert a picture of the pattern like on the screen somewhere, and the button band on that vest looked really, really nice, and I wanted to I bought the pattern to follow the directions basically for that button band to put it into the Ava cardigan, and I think that's where this project was during my last podcast episode. Alas, there was like something funky going on on the join stitch, because when you knit when you knit a double knit button band or a vertical rib button band, instead of each row being like the entire length of the ribbing, you're knitting very short rows back and forth, and you have to do some sort of decrease to join it to the body. And I don't know what went wrong. Initially, I thought I had accidentally switched a knit column to a purl stitch, to a purl column. So my plan had been to ladder down and fix that. However, when I started doing that, I don't know. I don't know what happened, but that wasn't the mistake that I made. And I was so frustrated with it. I just ripped the whole thing out and I followed the instructions in the pattern for the 2x2 ribbon button band. Clearly, I did something wrong because I do not think this will stretch that much that it will fix the funniness in blocking. It might, but it might not. But basically, my plan for this is I'm considering it a finished object for now. I marked it as completed on my Ravelry because it was just aggravating for me to see it as a whip for that long. Like, I know this literally has no meaning. This ambulance driving by. Basically, I know that doesn't really mean anything, but it's something that annoys me. So I said I will finish knitting this terrible button band, and what I'm going to do is I am just going to pack it away until the spring because I don't see myself wearing this at the moment. And oh, that's another reason why I did not steek it. Usually I would just, you know, finish it, sew on the buttons, blah blah blah, and maybe then put it away. But I didn't want to steek it because there is a 90% chance I will end up making this into something that is wearable for me, that I will enjoy wearing, but there's like still that 10% chance that I might want to frog this entire project. And once I steek it, I am kind of screwed out of reusing the yarn because I will have a bunch of really short pieces. Technically, because this is a quite rusticy, non-superwash wool, I could just split splice those back together, but that would be a lot of split splicing and really annoying. So what my plan is I'm going to pack this away until like March, April, May, sometime in the spring, where I will take it back out. I'm going to block it to see how it sits, and then 99% sure I will then rip out this ribbing and either attempt to do the vertical button band again or do a double knit button band. But yeah, considering it a finished object now because I really just like want it out of sight, I get kind of upset looking at it. Upset, annoyed, whatever you want to call it. Now, the yarn that I used for this project is, like I said, a quite rusticy woolly wool. It's Retrosaria, Rosa, Pomar, Brusca, and it looks really thin straight out of the ball. Like, when I first saw this was a orchard weight yarn, I was very confused by how thin it was. However, I was able to hit gauge on the Ava cardigan, which is really what was important, and I'm fairly certain the yarn store that I purchased it from, they had a washed and blocked sample, and this yarn does bloom with blocking. Yeah, it's not the softest yarn, but I personally can wear this next to skin, I think, with no problems. Like, I can feel it, but it doesn't feel scratchy or itchy to me. But like I said, it is a quite textured yarn. It is a 2-ply and it's pretty loosely plied, and there are kind of like tweedy bits, I would say. Like, it's not a flat brown, basically. It's kind of like the Noro yarn that the sweater that I'm wearing is in that it's not like a plain solid color. It does have like little patches of different shades of brown in it, which I personally like. I like that like rusticy look to wool, even if that did make getting nice even ribbing kind of annoying. And I also did such a terrible job at knitting the buttonholes, which I think another reason why I really didn't like this project. Like, I was really over it by the time I got to knitting the buttonholes, but I was like, I just want to get it done. And yeah, the tension is terrible. It's like, it honestly looks like chromosomes. Can you see it? Yeah, it looks like chromosomes. So yes, that is my terrible Ava cardigan that I'm calling a finished object for now. And like, none of these problems are because it's a bad pattern or because I'm using a bad yarn. This is purely just the way that I knit it and my personal preferences. I realized I forgot to include the price of this project, so if the lighting is different because I'm recording this like a few minutes later into the video and splicing it in here. So the cost of this project was actually very reasonable for like my personal budget. I used less than 8 balls of yarn, but I'm just counting the full 8 balls, and each ball is $10. However, I bought it on sale during the New Jersey Wool Walk, so my cost for this project is $64, which is really good considering it's a 100% wool garment. The project that was bringing me so much joy over the past 2 weeks is the Sophie hood by Petite, and it is a fully garter stitch project. It looks like a shawl like this, but then you have this hood section. So let me put it on. Mine is unblocked because I finished it last weekend and I wore it that day. I literally was like weaving in ends right until the point where I left my house, and then I left my house and I wore it because it's so warm and so comfortable. This is the Sophie hood by Petite. It is an all over garter stitch project. You cast on from one tip and you do a bunch of increases, shape the hood, decreases, and cast on for another tip. I think the most difficult part of this pattern is definitely the seaming of the back. You do some mattress stitching of the garter, and there's nothing about this project that I didn't enjoy. Let me try to go through my thoughts in a chronological order. So it is a worsted weight pattern. It's a little frustrating because Petite Knit doesn't list exact yardages for this pattern. It comes in 3 different sizes, and I think she has like 3 or 4 different yarn recommendations, and each of them have different yardages, and basically she gives you recommendations by grams. For instance, I think if you wanted the medium size, there's like 4 different yarns. I think it's like anywhere from 250 to 300 grams, but the yardages are anywhere from like 500 to 600 yards. And then if you look at project pages, there are people who have knit it with like 400 yards, and then people have knit it with over 600 yards. So just knowing how much yardage I would need for this project was a little bit tricky to figure out. And I'm really trying to prioritize knitting from stash, and I wasn't sure how much I would enjoy this project, so I didn't want to go out and purchase yarn for that reason. Alas, I did not have enough of any worsted weight yarn to make this project. Like, technically, I could have used a worsted weight sweater quantity, but the amount of yarn that it used was so weird that I would be left with like, I don't know, like 500 or 600 yards of worsted weight yarn, and then that would be another annoying thing to have in my stash, but I'm like, what am I going to do with that odd amount of worsted weight yarn? So instead, I decided to make mine a striped version. So I had 2 skeins of the Hedgehog Fibers Merino Aran in the colorway Hush, which is a soft purple color. And then I also had 2 skeins of the Spincycle Yarns Dream State colorway in the color Love Spell. And I ended up doing 2 row stripes for the entirety of the hood. It did take me a little bit to figure out the striping situation, because when I started striping all the way from the beginning, so you cast on like a few stitches and you're basically working consistent increases at different rates depending on the size that you knit. When I was starting off with the stripes, so if you ever knit an I-cord border, you know that it takes a few rows for the fabric to truly curl in on itself and form the I-cord. And when I was doing the stripes from the beginning, like the I-cord wasn't curling like the way it was supposed to be, and I was getting annoyed with it, so I just ended up doing just the purple color, which I'm calling like my main color. I ended up just doing that for the first few increases, and then once I got to a point where the I-cord was properly formed, I added in my Dream State, and I just did 2 row stripes for each of them. So each garter bump is 2 rows. And I have personally never knit a Sophie scarf or a Sophie shawl. I never really felt the need to purchase a pattern because I was like, it's a garter stitch scarf. If I really wanted to, I could just make it up myself. Or I think there's also a pretty popular free pattern called the Simple Thing, which you can follow. And yeah, and where was I going? In all of those patterns, I think the most common complaint that people had is it's difficult to know which row it's difficult to keep track of which row you are increasing on. And I think the addition of the stripes just made that so much easier to know, because I knew that I was always joining in my new yarn on the wrong side, and I knew that each stripe that I could physically see was 2 rows. So it wasn't like I was like trying to figure out like, is this a garter bump? Is that a garter bump? They were very, very clearly defined because they were each in different colors. So for that reason, I think I would honestly knit this pattern striped again. I would also like a I would also like a monochromatic one, but just for like the ease of knitting it, I think I would do a striped version. Because I feel like I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, even though it's so easy, like it's not really a project I can knit on while I'm watching a movie or TV or whatever, because you really have to pay attention to the rows. But because of the stripes, and obviously I still did use stitch markers to indicate the increases, but because of the stripes, it's literally so mindless and so easy. I worked on this while watching movies, while spending time with my family. I think I even took it out to dinner. So yeah, definitely recommend doing this project in stripes. And also it was just lovely to use up 2 yarns that I had in my stash that I didn't have plans with. And I really, really like this shade of Spincycle Love Spell. So it has like shades of yellow, light pink, and then kind of like a teal. And I think the skeins that I got, did I order these online or did I buy them in store? I forget, but anyways, the skeins that I had a lot of teal in them, and personally, I am not a big fan of teal. It's not a color that I really want to wear or knit with. And the thing is with Spincycle, until you knit it up, you don't really know what the colors would look like. So I actually think this was the perfect project for that yarn, because I think the purple just mutes the teal and it makes it something that I personally like a lot better. And at first I was worried that my garter stitch was looking kind of sloppy. Like, it's not the cleanest, but it doesn't look terrible. I did modify it. So there is a tutorial linked in the pattern, or I think you have to go on Petite Knit's website to get the tutorial. I think the tutorial is very clear. However, because I was doing the color changes, if I followed the tutorial strictly, I think the tutorial has you match your stitch with the edge stitch. However, because I was changing colors, the edge was the same edge that I was carrying up my yarn, and my edge stitch was already kind of loose because of that. Instead of match stitching the edge stitch, I just went in one stitch and match stitched. So there is a little bit of a ridge on the inside of my hood, but I don't think it looks sloppy, and like I weaved in my ends along the edge. And honestly, when I'm wearing it, you really can't see it because like when it's sitting on the back of my head, I guess it'll be kind of like this. So like the top of the hood mostly covers it, and my hair is usually down, so I'm really not concerned about that being like something annoying to look at. I also did knit the medium size because, like I was saying, I wasn't sure about the yardage. And at first I was kind of annoyed because I used a lot less yarn than I thought I would. I used less than 500 yards. So I did have a lot of yarn left over, and I thought if I knew this, I could have knit the large because I thought I wanted it as large as possible. However, the medium is honestly still a really good size. Like, I can still wrap it around twice comfortably, and this is without blocking. Because it's garter, I assume that when I block it, it will grow even more. And oh my god, I look like an egg. But this is literally so warm. It's been like below freezing every single day lately, and I wore this to the city last weekend when I think it was like, I don't know, like 20 degrees outside with a wind chill. With the wind chill, I think it was even lower. And when I was wearing this, like my head and my ears and my neck did not feel cold at all. So overall, just like a 10 out of 10 project for me. I can definitely see myself making more, and I also think this would be a great gift knit. I think this took me like a week to make, but that was while I was knitting other stuff. And also, I did have to frog a pretty significant portion of it because I was doing my decreases on the wrong stitch. So that is a reminder to always read your pattern properly, because actually this is like one of 3 accessories that I've knit over the past 2 weeks, and all 3 projects I had to frog, decrease, or increase sections because I didn't read the instructions properly. But because all of the projects were so enjoyable, like I wasn't even really mad about having to rip back because I'm like, okay, I enjoyed doing it. I can do it again. Here's a little bit of a close-up on the colors. I just think it looks so good. So it goes from like these blues to yellows, greens. Then here's the other side. Yellow, like some pinks, yellows, some brighter greens, and then into yellow and pink. Oh, I think this is the point where I joined in my new skein, so there's a little bit of like a color discrepancy, but honestly, it blends in so well, I can't really even tell. Here's the teal color that I was like, I don't really know if I would like to wear on its own, but I really like the way that it looks in this hood. I will share the cost of this project. I've decided that this year when I'm sharing the project cost, I'm just going to include the cost of the entire skein of yarn, unless it's like a scrappy project or a leftover yarn project. But I don't know, that is a hurdle I will decide in the future, because when I am using a fresh skein of yarn, like I had to buy that skein of yarn to use it, and it just makes calculating things easier. So I used 2 skeins of the Hedgehog Fibers Merino Aran, which is quite a pricey yarn. However, I bought this on sale at Annie and Company in the Upper East Side during the during the New York City yarn crawl. So I got 2 skeins for $27.20 because they are 50% off, and then whenever they have their sales, which is like every single yarn crawl and just like on certain long weekends, they have 20% off store-wide usually. So 2 skeins cost me $27.20, and then I also used 2 skeins of Spincycle Dream State, and I purchased it before they had their like last price increase a year or 2 ago, so that cost me $68. So my total cost for this is $95.20, which is quite expensive for an accessory for like my personal preferences, budget, whatever. However, I think my cost per wear for this is going to be so good. I have literally finished this a week ago and I've already worn it 4 times. It's simply so wearable. Don't be surprised if there is a second one on my needles next episode. I have one last finished object, and this one flew off my needles. This is the 2x2. I don't know if it's called the 2x2 beanie or just the 2x2, and I forget the designer's name, but that will be on the screen and in the description box below. So this is, as the name suggests, a 2x2 rib beanie. So I don't remember if I had this project on the needles last episode or not, but I had initially cast on an Oslo hat with this yarn, but it was completely off gauge, which I knew, so I did cast on for a few sizes smaller. I think I might have cast on with the smallest size because this is an Aran weight yarn, and I knit myself through the double folded brim, and I knit myself all the way up to the crown shaping before I realized it just wasn't working. Even though I knit a smaller size, because the wool was so thick and my gauge was so off, it was still turning out huge. Also, because this is an Aran weight wool and the Oslo hat has a triple folded brim, essentially, you have 3 layers of fabric around your ears, like, it was just gonna be way too thick. It was flaring. I just didn't like the way that it was looking. So I ended up ripping it out. And because I have been wanting to knit more ribbed beanies, I was looking through Ravelry to find a pattern for a ribbed beanie and Aran weight yarn, and this is what I found, and I'm really happy with the result. It is knit, you cast on for the bottom, and then you basically knit straight until you get to the decreases. It's a very straightforward pattern. There is only one size. However, I think you can look through people's Ravelry project notes and you can see the modifications that they made, and I'm fairly certain the designer also tells you in the pattern like whatever number of stitches you cast on has to be either divisible, I think, by 8 or 12. I forget the exact number, but something like that. It might be 8 because I think you decrease 8 stitches each round. But don't quote me on that. Look at the pattern if you want to know for sure. So I knit this. I didn't want this to have too much room in the top of the hat because this is a gift knit and that is what the recipient wanted. And also I just prefer that too. I don't really like hats that have like a little bubble at the top of the head. That is not my personal style. I knit this to be, I think, about 8 inches before I started to do the crown decreases. And like I said, this is one of the projects where I did have to frog because this is a free pattern, so I'm not giving anything away. But basically, before you start your decreases, you have to offset your beginning of round marker by 1 stitch to make sure that your decreases, like your rib, flows nicely in the decreases. And I didn't read that, and I just started knitting the decreases. It was looking weird, but I'm like, oh, it probably just looks weird now. I'm sure like as I continue going, it will look fine. And then I finished like 75% of the decreases until I was like, no, this really looks terrible. And I started looking at people's project pages and I was like, yeah, mine is definitely off. Reread the pattern and saw that thing where you have to offset at the beginning of round marker. I ripped it out, not a big deal. It was actually, I think, a blessing in disguise because the way that the pattern is written, you are decreasing every other row. But I did knit this on bigger needles than suggested because I am using an Aran weight yarn and the pattern was written for a worsted weight yarn. So my row gauge was larger than the pattern suggested. Or I don't even think the pattern has a row gauge included, but I just know from previous experience, whenever I size up a needle, my row gauge always goes up. So my crown cheaping was ending up quite a bit taller than I wanted it to be. My goal was for the crown shaping to take about like 2.5 inches based on like other people's project notes that seemed to be like on average, and I had knit the 8 inches for the hat based on that. However, when I was knitting every other row on the 4.5mm needles, the crown was just becoming way taller than I wanted it to be. So I ended up modifying it and I decreased every single row for the crown shaping. And I did find like a project page that had done that and I liked the way that their hat had looked, so I assumed it would be fine. I do think it has caused like a little bit of a bumpiness around the beginning of the decreases, and I think you can also see it when I wear the hat. You can kind of see like this bumpiness from where the rapid decreases start. However, I have not blocked this out yet, so I'm assuming that when I do block it out, that should not be a problem. I am planning to basically block it out on something round. I think some people use a balloon. I don't think I have like any like clean basketball or something. I think a basketball would be too large anyways. So I think I'm going to try a balloon and see how it blocks out because I want to give this to the recipient. And the yarn that I used for this is a yarn that I was very excited to use. Let me get the label. I have one of my whips in this bag. So I actually caked up the yarn because I don't know, I don't really like knitting from the yarn balls that like commercially dyed yarns sometimes come in. If it's like a 50 gram or like a 25 gram ball, I can deal with it. But when it's like a huge 100 gram yarn, I feel like it's kind of annoying, especially because I was working on this project while I was walking and I don't like pulling from the outside. I always like doing the center pull, and I feel like sometimes those huge like yarn balls, when you do a center pull, there's a lot of knots in the center from that you create while you're pulling, so it's just easier for me to cake it up. Anywho, all that yapping, and I didn't even tell you what the yarn is. So this is Lion Brand Local Grown. It is a 100% USA wool made in the USA. So on the label it says made in the USA. It doesn't say anything about the milling, but then when I went on the Lion Brand website, it did say it is also milled in the USA, which I think I've talked about it briefly before, but I would like to use more yarns that are made / grown in the USA, and it's kind of pretty rare to see like a big brand make that kind of yarn, especially like a more affordable or like a brand that you'll find at big box craft stores. So this has definitely been on my radar for a while. They do sell this yarn at Joann's, and the reason I finally purchased it is because it went on clearance. I never went ahead and purchased it before because like that yarn is always available to me. Like I can just go into the store whenever. So unless I'm immediately interested in casting on the project, it didn't really make sense for me to purchase this yarn and just have it sit in stash because it is so readily available. But then I saw it was on clearance and it was leaving Joann and I was really sad. So I was like, okay, now is the time to finally purchase this yarn and I do not regret it. I wish that Joann brought it back. Actually, I wish that Michaels would carry this yarn. I feel like Michaels, like my local Michaels, has several aisles of yarn, and they have like a section that's like this big for the wool yarns, which is like just some Patons yarn, which is nice, but I would like more options. And then they just have like 3 rows of chunky acrylic, which, okay, that's great. People love their acrylic yarn and they deserve to have it, but like, can you put a little bit more space and have some more wool yarns? That would be nice. There's another ambulance driving by. So that is my side tangent on this local grown yarn, and I totally would purchase it again. The color range is kind of just okay to me. I think I prefer maybe like brighter colors, and I think the color range is more, I don't know, like neutral or like natural colors. Yeah, so the color range is not my favorite, but I did like this navy blue, and the recipient wanted a navy blue hat. So there that is. And yeah, it said it's 100% wool, Aran weight. Oh, and since it is on clearance, I'm fairly certain I got this ball for $8.50. Hence, that is the cost of the project. I used almost the entire ball. I think I had 9 grams of yarn left over. And I would purchase this again from the Lion brand website. And I would say it's a fairly soft yarn. Like, I don't feel any scratchiness when I touch it to my head. And usually for accessories, especially like a gift knit, I would use a superwash. However, when I was like looking online at what my local yarn stores had, I couldn't find a worsted weight navy superwash that I really liked the color of. So that is that. I guess I can move into works in progress, because my work in progress is also with this yarn, because I just bought 2 balls because I wasn't sure how much I would need for the beanie, especially because I initially planned on knitting the Oso hat, which does often take more than 100 grams. Actually, I think I've knit the hat 2 or 3 times now, and I've never actually used more than 100 grams. But that's because I always make the crown shorter than what the pattern dictates, because I don't like the space at the top of the crown. Okay, so my work in progress, like I said, I had an extra ball of the yarn and then some. So I decided I would knit a matching pair of fingerless mitts. I only have 1 so far. Oh yeah, so this is also a free pattern. I wanted to knit a coordinating pair of 2x2 ribbed fingerless mittens, and that is just what I did. This is, I think the pattern is called Waum, W-A-U-M mitts. And I also knit this on a needle size bigger than what the pattern suggested. I think the pattern is written for worsted weight yarn on 3.75 millimeter needles, and because I was using an Aran weight yarn, I sized up to 4 millimeter needles. And this is slightly big on me because the person I'm knitting for has larger hands than me. It's a really, really straightforward pattern. This knit up so quickly. I cast this on yesterday afternoon and I was finished with it last night. And I think maybe I spent 2 or 3 hours max knitting on it, and that's after I basically knit this whole portion, and I had to rip it out because I did the increases incorrectly. So I basically knit like a good, I don't know, third of the mitt twice. So this was a very, very quick knit. I think I've really just gotten into a rhythm with knitting the 2x2 rib, because that beanie also only took like 2 or 3 days to knit. And previous to that, my Oso hat had been on the needles for over a week. I don't really think I have anything to say about this. It's a fairly straightforward pattern. There's no difference between the left hand or the right hand. So you can knit the same exact thing twice, and you don't have to worry about putting the wrong one on the wrong hand. The pattern doesn't give the best directions for picking up stitches for the gusset. I think they did get some feedback on like how directions are kind of unclear, so they did give additional information, but I didn't find that particularly clear either. But ultimately, I don't think it's that big of a deal, and I don't have a hole in it, and I specifically, when I was picking up stitches, I left a larger tail there because I knew that I would probably have to stitch that section closed, but I picked up so many extra stitches that there is no hole. It is a little bit bulky in that spot, but I don't think anybody besides a knitter would notice. So that is Waum mitt number 1. I will not have this as a finished, or I guess I'll have a picture of it as a finished object for the next podcast. because I plan on knitting mitt number 2 tonight and then gifting it tomorrow. And I did actually end up blocking this because basically I cast on the number of stitches for the size medium, assuming that it would be similar, my finished object would be similar to the size large because I was going up a needle size. However, this pattern doesn't have any schematics or like finished measurements. It just says like, oh, medium might fit a woman's hand, large might fit a man's hand. So that is kind of frustrating, but it's a free pattern, so that's totally fine. So I stretched it out a little bit when I was blocking it last night. I didn't use wool wash or anything, so what I'm planning to do is finish the second mitt and then I can just block all 3 of those together. So that is whip number 1 and the one that was the most fun for me. I guess we can now talk about my 2 gift knit whips. I'm going to try to keep this kind of brief because these projects are kind of annoying me and they will be in the next podcast as well. And if you want to hear more information on the construction, the modifications I made, yada yada yada, you can watch Knitting Podcast episode 10 because I do go over them. So this is my dad's sweater, which is the Joha loop sweater by Other Loops. It is a top-down raglan construction with colorwork in the yoke. I had some complaints about the charts, which you can read about in my previous episode. This looks like a finished object, right? So one thing I did since last episode, my dad did want the sleeves shorter. So initially I thought I would have to cut in, but then he said, no, you can just make the ribbing shorter. So I just ripped out the ribbing, or I undid the bind off. I just did like a regular bind off in pattern, and I frogged some of the ribbing, and now the sleeves fit him fine. Now the problem is with the body. So the reason I am partially annoyed with this project is because I had my dad try this on Christmas when I gave it to him. Then he said he wanted some length, so I added a little bit more stockinette. So then he tried it on again before I started the ribbing. Then I knit the ribbing. Then he tried it on again before I did the bind off. And then I bound off. Then he tried it on again, and then he said the body is too long. So I don't know if I want to, I really don't enjoy knitting 1x1 rib. So I don't know if I want to rip out the ribbing. What I'm thinking of doing is cutting into the sweater somewhere in the body and just frogging some of the yarn, some of the rows, and then Kitchener stitching it on. Alternatively, I was thinking I would just frog up, and then so I did do some decreases before I did the ribbing. You can kind of see like the bubbly shape of it. That was fine because that's kind of what he asked for, but I'm not crazy about the way it looks. So what I was thinking of doing is, if I feel up to it, is just ripping it out and then up to like somewhere like here in the middle of the body, and then doing the decreases more slowly and then reknitting the ribbing. But honestly, I don't think I have it in me to do that. I have to look at where I did my decreases, but alternatively, I could make a cut a few rows before the ribbing and then frog up a little bit, frog up however much he wants me to take out, and then reknit some of the body with more gradual decreases. But really that depends on how rapidly I did the decreases before the ribbing, because I did do them quite rapidly because he decided that he wanted it narrower while I was almost done with the body. My other concern about the Kitchener stitch is there are these 2 purl columns on each side of the sweater where after you finish you are supposed to go in with your contrast color, and I think with a crochet hook put in a contrast color stripe to basically continue a continuation of the one from the yoke. And I don't think I've ever Kitchener stitched with when there's a purl stitch, but then I'm thinking it doesn't really matter if that stitch looks funky because I'm gonna go over it basically with a duplicate stitch in the white yarn. That is the state of this sweater. I also marked this as complete on Ravelry because I considered it a complete object. It wasn't like a few days later until he asked me to make that change. So mentally it's a finished object even though it is not literally one. But I'd really ideally love to get both gift knits done by the end of this month, because I think that gives me a decent amount of time, because it's not actually that much knitting. Once I get into it, I've just been kind of like frustrated about having to make the changes, which is silly because I'm like always frogging my stuff and reknitting projects. I think like mentally I was just kind of done with them because I worked on them so much last month because I made them so quickly. So I realized like this project hasn't even been on the needles for a month. I think I finished this in like 2 weeks. So putting in a little bit more time to make it a good fit. It's not a big deal and I should stop being annoyed. And then my mom's sweater, as you may know if you watched my previous episode, is made with the same yarn. So for my mom, I'm using the same piece fleece and I knit her the Lume sweater by Sari Nordland, and as you may see, it is now down a sleeve. While I was knitting the sleeve, I didn't realize how off my row gauge was. So the sleeve turned out huge. Basically, it is so much longer than what the pattern describes. Like, I'm fairly certain I measured it. It's like 48 centimeters, which is longer than the sleeves on the largest size. And my mom is also short and she's quite slim. So there was no way the sleeve was ever gonna fit her. And I should have just accepted that mistake when I was knitting it and frogged it right then and there instead of being like, oh, maybe it'll fit, maybe it'll be fine, because I knew I was wrong then. I had to make that change. So what I did is you can see I picked up the stitches on this sleeve. I picked up the stitches after the colorwork because I did modify this, so the last motif was after the sleeve separation. I picked up stitches there, and then I'm also going to pick up stitches before the colorwork at the bottom of the sleeve, similar to this sleeve, because I didn't really want to reknit the colorwork because I already weaved in all the ends on it. And then I'm going to frog the entire sleeve, basically, because the sleeve is also very, very wide, and this is partially because my gauge is much looser than the pattern and this yarn blooms a lot, and also I think the pattern is just written with very wide sleeves as is. I ended up doing extra decreases in the sleeves because of that, and even then, like, this sleeve is in circumference, I think is like 4 centimeters less than the smallest size, and it's still quite a lot. It's still quite a wide sleeve, and I do not have skinny arms, and even on me there's quite a bit of positive ease. So that is something to note if you are knitting this pattern. So yeah, I did that and I reknit the first sleeve, and you can just see how much shorter it is than my original sleeve. And I think my final sleeve length will be about 35 to 36 centimeters, which is still shorter than the sleeve length of the smallest sizes of the sari pattern. However, my mom is short, so it does make sense that she would need shorter sleeves. But you can just see how comically long the sleeve is. And then the body of this moves fairly quickly because it's, you know, a large circumference, 5.5 millimeter needles. I actually used the leftover yarn that I frogged from the sleeve that I didn't need for the Kitchener stitch, and I already put that into the body. And I did start adding in some decreases along the sides of the sweater. I only did 2 sections of decreases because I don't want it to have that same balloon effect as my dad's sweater, because I don't think my mom would want them. But my plan so far is to cut out and reknit the sleeve, and then I would want to Kitchener them on the same day, and then after the sleeves are done, I am going to have her try it on to figure out the length for the body, because I don't want to knit the body too long either. And then after I finish the body, I'll do the neckline. It's kind of funny because with all my knits, I was afraid that they would be too short and too small, and then I ended up having the opposite problem. They were all too big and too long. So that is the continuing saga of my last minute gift. Okay, my camera setup is a little bit different because I finished recording and then I realized I forgot to talk about one of my whips, and that is my cardigan number 9. I think last time I had just knit the 2 saddles. I haven't made that much progress on it, but I just want to talk about it because I am enjoying this project. Since last time, I have basically knit the back yoke and it's on hold so that I can pick up stitches for the front yoke. This is a pattern that I've knit before. It was on my most worn knits of 2024 list. It's just very easy to wear and it fits me well. The yarns that I'm using for it, I'm holding 2 yarns. First yarn that I'm holding is the Wool Dreamers Manchalope, which is an unspun wool. It comes double stranded. It is about a worsted weight, I think, and I'm using it in the darkest brown colorway, which I want to say is called like Pardo, possibly. But the name will be on the screen and in the, no, I usually don't put the color in the description box. It'll be on my Ravelry project page and on the screen. And this is what I have left from the ball that I had kicked up, because when it comes to unspun, I personally hand wind them into balls. I don't like knitting directly from the plate because that introduces additional friction and the yarn is more prone to tearing that way. And I'm holding it with a strand of mohair, as I like to do when I knit with unspun. This is quite possibly my least favorite mohair. However, I had it in stash for like 3 years, so I might as well knit with it. And it is the Drops Kid Silk Mohair in the dark brown colorway. I do really like this colorway. And it does have a nice halo to it, and I haven't noticed it shedding too much. This is definitely shedding less than the other color I used, which was like the cream or the white. The reason I don't like the Drops Kid Silk is I think it is the itchiest mohair that I've tried. And the cream color did shed a lot. This one I'm not having that same problem. Good at catching the light. Okay, that's the end of this segment. I guess we will go back to me sitting in my chair. My last whip is a really fun one. So this year I have decided I want to knit myself my first blanket, and I decided to knit the Jigsaw Puzzle Blanket by Stephen West because I had purchased the pattern, I think, when it came out, and I've always really enjoyed the project, and it seemed great, a great use for leftovers or scraps or mini skeins, etc. And my goal is to knit 4 sections a month, and on average I want to knit anywhere from like 100 to 120 grams of yarn, because there are people in their project notes that have written out exactly how many grams of yarn they used for each section. And basically I've made a list for the first 4 months of the year, which sections I want to knit each month. And then after April, I will reassess, like, is that too many sections per month? Is that not enough sections per month? We'll see. So I have knit sections 1 and 2 so far. It looks kind of funny on the needles, but there it is. And I'm still undecided. Oh wait, I was showing you the wrong side. Here's the right side. I'm still undecided if I want to make this like a purposeful project where I'm specific with my color choices on each section. I might buy some yarn to supplement what I already have to make sure I'm sticking to a color palette that I really like, or if I should just embrace like the scrappy, ugly, it sounds mean to say, but the scrappy ugliness of this pattern, or not the pattern, of my color choices. There are some project pages that are absolutely stunning, and they were definitely very intentional with their colors. As of right now, I'm kind of leaning towards embracing the ugliness because this section 1 is in a really ugly color in my opinion. So section 1 I knit with Felcolana Arwetta in, I forgot the name of the color, but I'm fairly certain it's a discontinued colorway because when I was looking at the yarn, I couldn't find it on sale on the website that I was looking at. But maybe that website just doesn't have that color. And I was really happy that I was able to use all of that yarn up because I really don't like this color. But then I got to the end of that section and then I had like 4 more rows left and I ran out of that color. I didn't want this to be a scrappy project in which each section was scrappy. I wanted each section to be a solid color. That I know for certain. So then I was like, do I buy another ball of it? It's not that expensive. But then I'd have to pay for shipping. But then I was like, wait, the whole point of this was to get yarn out of your stash. Why would you buy another ball of ugly yarn? Don't be stupid. So I looked in my yarn stash and I found another ugly yarn that I don't like. I forget the name of this yarn. It's by the company that makes Addy needles, Scassel. I don't know. But they make yarn too, and I bought this yarn because I thought I would try to knit a pair of socks with a non-wool yarn. But I ended up really not liking the yarn. It had like a plasticky feel to it. I do think it had a pretty high, I think it was at least like 20 or 30% polyamide. There might have been some cotton in there. But yeah, I didn't enjoy the knitting experience of it, so I did frog whatever I had cast on for those socks, and the yarn has just been sitting in my stash. The yarn also has some tweediness to it, and I'm not sure if you can see that on camera. That is also part of the reason why I wanted to try it out, because I feel like a lot of people that I follow use hand-dyed tweedy yarn, and I was never really certain if I liked the texture of that sort of tweedy yarn. I really like tweed yarn, for instance, like the Noro tweed yarns, or like the Isaiah or the Studio Donegal tweed yarns, where the tweediness is spun into the fiber. I realized after this yarn that I don't really like the tweed yarns when it looks like the tweed is added after the fact. Like when I look at a lot of the hand-dyed tweed yarn bases, it's like your standard superwash merino, and then there's just like pieces that look like that have been like stuck to it, and that's just like not to my taste. So I guess that was one benefit of purchasing that yarn. I do still have quite a bit of it left because it was a 100-gram skein, I think, and I think I used it in some like other scallopy projects, but I have a lot of it left, so maybe it will make its way into another section of this blanket. The only good thing about it is that that ugly yarn was a pretty close color match to the other ugly yarn, so I was able to finish that section without it being too noticeable. Like when I look at it up close, of course I can see the difference, but I don't know if you can see the difference on camera, but like in the viewfinder I cannot see the difference. And that is the end of my whips, and I do have some acquisitions. First up, I have my last yarn purchase of 2024. So when I went to Joann's to buy the local grown wool from Lion Brand, of course, I couldn't resist looking at the other yarn they had there. And they had this really pretty color of the Patons Croy sock yarn. And this is a slightly thicker sock yarn. It is still a 75-25 blend. Each of these are 50-gram balls, and you get 166 yards. And I feel like usually at Michael's and Joann's, the color selection of the Patent Croy socks is like kind of abysmal, which is a shame because if you look at the Ravelry project pages for this yarn, there's so many cool colorways, but like I feel like at my Michael's there's like white, black, grayish, and like those are fine colors, but like I want the fun striping colors. So when I saw this one in Joann's, I was like, oh my god, I need to get it. This is the colorway Midnight Orchid, and it's a really pretty color in my opinion. It has like cream, greens, and some purples, and I'm very excited to get this one knit up into a pair of socks. And I have actually never knit a pair of socks with Patons Croy. This is what I think, or not Deep Stash. This one is from 2023. So this is the only other Patons Croy that I have purchased. This one is from Michael's, and it's the colorway Amethyst Stripes. And I knit I forget the name of the pattern, but it's like a modular sock pattern, and I'm definitely going to frog it because I knit it on 2.25 needles, which is just way too tight for this thicker sock yarn, and the fabric is like so stiff with absolutely no stretch, also because of the way that this sock is constructed. I think I would knit the pattern again, but I think I would use a thinner sock yarn, and I'd probably go up to a 2.5 millimeter needles. So my plan is at some point this year to frog this sock and make a pair of socks with this colorway. I don't even remember if this sock used 50 grams or if I have any left over. But yeah, that's the only other colorway of this sock yarn that I've knit up. But I've heard such great things about this yarn, about how hard wearing it is. And like I said, I really like looking at the colorways of this yarn on Ravelry. My plan is to, after I knit up these colorways, I really want to purchase more of this sock yarn, because on the Yarnspirations site, they actually have a lot of the colorways that I was interested in. There's this one specific colorway that's like, it's kind of like rainbowy, but it's like a bluish rainbow. There's a lot of blues featured in it, and I'm obsessed with this colorway, and I keep looking for it, but whenever it's on like Amazon or Walmart or whatever, the price is jacked up. Like I'm not gonna pay $20 or $30 for 2 balls of a yarn that I can get directly from the manufacturing for $4. So after I knit both of these pairs up, I will be purchasing more of the sock yarn because it's so tempting. And the thing is, like, each ball is like $4, or when I was looking earlier, it was on sale for $4. I think the regular price is like $8. But I feel like stores like this, they always have sales. The thing is, it's so easy to buy a lot of it because I was like, oh, I like this color, I like that color, I like this color. Before you know it, I had $80 worth of affordable sock yarn in my cart, plus $10 for shipping, plus I'm not sure if there's tax or not. So I'm like, oh, I'm buying this affordable sock yarn, but then I would end up spending $100, which is silly. So motivation to knit these socks, and then I can purchase some more. And I do think I would like to gift knit a pair of socks for my dad out of these because we were in the city and I was wearing my, what is it, Regia tweed hand knit socks, and he was like so impressed with the fact that I was wearing hand knit wool socks. He's pretty hard wearing on his socks, so most of my stash of sock yarn is superwash merino, and I don't know how well that would hold up with how hard he is on his socks, but I've heard that this sock yarn is much more durable. And I do think they have some like fun colors that are not overly vibrant. Like they're fun because of the stripes, but the color palette is quite muted, and I think those would make for a nice gift pair of socks for him. Also, I'm unsure of how much yarn I would need to use for that. If I would need to get 3 balls of yarn. Since he does have a bigger foot, I think I would want to make a ribbed sock just to make sure that it fits properly. There's more wiggle room with the ribbing. That was my last yarn purchase of 2024, and I've already made my first yarn purchase of 2025. If you follow me on Instagram, you maybe saw me post about the sale, because this was like the sale of the year. I mean, I know it's only January, but this was an amazing sale. So I bought a sweater quantity of the Ula and Leah cashmere yarn. So this is a 100% DK weight cashmere. I bought 6 skeins of this. Each skein is 100 grams and has 215 yards. And this just feels so lovely. I really never had 100% cashmere yarn on, sorry, there's like a really loud truck outside. I never really had 100% yarn. I've never really had a 100% cashmere sweater on my radar because I just assumed it would be astronomically expensive. This is 600 grams of cashmere. If I were to buy the equivalent in the Cardiff cashmere, that's like what they sell, come in 25 gram balls, so 4 for 100 times 6, that's 24 balls, and each ball is $30. So that is $120. Is that correct? That is outrageously expensive. I guess it's $29. 29 times 24, $696. And I got this whole sweater quantity for less than $100. So basically, Ula and Leah, they are a brand I've been wanting to try for a while because they work with Mongolian are cashmere are goats, right? I want to say sheep herders. Basically, they work with like the local Mongolian cashmere economy. Like the yarn is milled there, it's produced there. They only get their shearing once a year because that's what the farmers do. They shear the coats of their flocks once a year. They have a Kickstarter every year, and every year I miss the Kickstarter. So when you participate in the Kickstarter, you get the yarn at a discounted rate, and I think they were getting ready to ship out their Kickstarter yarn. So they had a site-wide sale, so people who either missed out on the Kickstarter or they purchased during the Kickstarter and they wanted to add more to their order could get the yarn at a discounted price. And the price was really good. Like a lot of the yarn was 30 to 50% off, and all their fiber blends are really nice. They use cashmere, they use yak, they use camel, like all luxurious fibers. And because they are a smaller company, they seem to be pretty transparent about like their production, and I really like, it's another one of those brands where I really appreciate the ethos behind the brand, so I've been wanting to try them for a while. So when I saw this yarn on sale, I simply could not resist. I don't know if I have anything else to say about this. Oh, this does feel quite sturdy. Like it's a very soft, but it also feels quite sturdy. It is one of those yarns where they say that the yarn does come with spinning oils still in it, so they give you instructions on how to wash it, and then I assume it will bloom. Oh yeah, here it says it is our goal to showcase the quality of raw materials and workmanship found in Mongolia while increasing sustainability and development in the industry. They work with a network of local herding cooperatives, washers, and spinners. So yeah, everything is sourced, processed, and manufactured in Mongolia, which I think is really cool. The goal is, I think I would like to knit some sort of plain stockinette sweater in a different yarn, and then once I decide, okay, I really like this pattern, then I can knit it with this really nice fancy yarn. That is the last of the yarn talk. I do have some fabric acquisitions and one finished object I would like to talk about. However, if you do not care about that, you can either finish watching this video and come back the next time, or you can skip to the outro if you want to hear that. But if you don't want to hear anything more, thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you again next time. And if you do want to listen to my short fabric and quilt talk slash outro, let's get into that. So I guess since we're in the acquisitions, we'll talk about acquisitions first. Actually, no, let me talk about my finished object first. So back in September, my cousin had a baby girl who was so cute, and she is in India. And obviously, I'm in the US, so I did not get to see her. So I decided I wanted to make a little quilt for her. The little quilt ended up being quite big, even though I did follow the size for the baby size quilt in the pattern. I guess like I just don't really know what size a baby size quilt is meant to be. Because in my opinion, it was big. It was like as tall as me. I'm only like 5'1", but that's pretty tall for a quilt. And I might have made it even smaller than the pattern. So the quilt that I made is I don't have it with me. So I didn't take excellent photos for it because I literally finished it like 2 hours before I had to drop off my parents at the airport. So the time crunch was real, but I have some not so great photos of it, which I can share. So, oh yeah, the quilt that I made is the Campfire Glow Quilt. It was so much fun. It was my first time making those patchwork stars, which I forget the name of, and making 9 patch squares. I didn't do the best job of cutting. I didn't do the best job of quilting, but honestly, it was a learning experience. It's for a baby. I don't think the baby's gonna care that the star is like slightly crooked or one star is smaller than another star. It was just a lot of fun and a great experience, and I was really excited that I was able to basically quilt this like 5-foot long blanket on my tiny cheapy sewing machine. So I have a lot of fabric extras, and I really love to quilt some more this year, especially because I bought this cool like quilting cutting thing on Black Friday because it had been on my list for a few months, but it's super expensive. And one of my local stores, quilting stores in New Jersey, has a 30% off sale, like store-wide sale on Black Friday. So I specifically know that's all I wanted to buy. However, since I finished this quilt, I haven't sewn anything because it was just such a big project. Now that I'm talking about it, I do think I'm going to start some sort of sewing project this weekend. It'll probably be something smaller, but I'm excited to sew again. And I'd really love to improve and learn more about sewing and quilting this year because it's a fun craft. I think the reason why I don't sew as much as I knit is that knitting is so easy to take on the go, and it's also really easy to knit in short spurts, and I don't need a lot of space to do it. Like if I have 10 minutes of downtime, I can knit. If I'm gonna sit in the car, I can knit. If I'm gonna have to wait somewhere, I can take my knitting with me, and it just makes it so much more accessible versus sewing. Like I have to take out the sewing machine, I have to set it up, I have to plug it in, I have to change the thread. Like there's just a lot of like preemptive steps that go into it because I don't have a dedicated space where I can just like leave my sewing notions out. But that's not going to stop me from learning more sewing this year, especially because I have so much fabric. In addition to all the leftover fabric that I have from that quilt, because I bought a lot more than I ended up using because I wasn't sure about the colors, I also purchased other fabric, but I'll only share my most recent fabric acquisition because I'm very excited about it. So this beautiful fabric is from the Fabulism collection with the house that Lars built, I think is the designer's name. I forget, but the collection's name was like Swedish something, and I was obsessed with this collection. Like I will insert a picture at some point. Actually, I also bought a fat quarter bundle from this collection during the pre-order last year, and I was like fixated on this collection for months. Every single pattern in this collection, stunning, beautiful, gorgeous. I just wanted to make everything with it. Obviously, that is unrealistic, so I settled myself with getting the fat quarter bundle, and I would eventually like to knit a quilt with, not knit, would like to sew a quilt with it. My goal is to first sew some like smaller quilted objects, then I would like to sew another like proper sized quilt similar to the quilt I knit from, I keep saying knit, similar to the quilt I sewed for my cousin's baby. And then at the end of the year, hopefully I will have built up the confidence to sew a quilt with the fat quarter bundle I bought from this collection. So the store that I bought it from is called Golden Girls Fiber Co. And I signed up for their email list after I ordered the fabric, and I saw that they were having a New Year's sale, and they had also clearanced this collection out. So I was like, now is the time to purchase this. It was like 50% off. How could I not? And I ended up getting 4 yards of fabric of 2 of the different colors from this collection. So this is like a pale yellow. There are these flowers on it. And then the other one is like this woven pink and red design. Oh, they're so pretty. And the plan is I would like to knit, oh, I keep saying knit. I would like to sew garments out of it. And 4 yards of fabric is quite a bit. So I should have enough to do a dress or a coat. I'm not sure. I am kind of thinking of sewing the Rue quote by Spaghetti Western Sewing because I really love the look of that. And I think it would look so cool in this fabric. But I'm not like 100% sold on that. I'm not going to be sewing these up immediately because I want to get more confidence in my sewing skills before I use this really nice fabric. And then for this one, I think I would love to knit some sort of shorter dress with a frilly collar. So that will be projects later on in the year. And I would totally recommend purchasing from this store. This is my second time purchasing from them. When I purchased a pre-order, like they were very nice. Like I wasn't like concerned about it being late or anything, but they were like, oh, we just got the fabric. We're going to be mailing it out soon. So that was nice. And they also have free shipping over $10. If you do pre-orders, they have like 15% off on most pre-orders. And I think because they're like a smaller shop, they don't keep a lot of stuff in stock. So they frequently like clearance out some of the older collections. So that is how I was able to score all this fabric for like 80 bucks. Okay, so that is the end of this video. That was a lot of talking. If you made it here, thank you so much for watching. I think this may end up being my longest video to date. I definitely need to drink a hot drink after talking for so much. If you made it all the way here, thank you so much. Feel free to give this video a like and follow along for future videos. I think my next video will be my 2025 Make 9 and knitting goals. Yeah. That will probably be the next video. As always, I would love to know what was on your needles while watching this video because I'm nosy and I love to know what other people are working on. And hope to see you again next time. Happy knitting. Happy 2025.